All right. Morbific is a Finnish death metal band, very much in a late 80s, kind of old school death metal sound, taking from both like New York death metal, Midwest, or I guess just Autopsy, Impetigo, Mortician, Rod of War, Grave. I could name a lot of bands here, but they do have some love for early Finnish death metal. So their second album is basically iteration upon the first and the first idea with slightly better production. The drums sound a lot better on this record and really no big change in style. They're better players now. They definitely have that a little bit of a touch of like depravity or that sort of early Finnish death metal sound that really you kind of want approaching a record like this, the way they described it. So that means there's some emphasis on leads. There's a couple more slower songs. There's a little bit more atmosphere to it, but it still rings pretty, uh, very much in a sort of garage or basement level death metal. It's very, like a late 80s, early 90s kind of sound, but not so much the typical polished early 90s uh, thing. And I know that's hard to describe outside of a couple of old bands and a couple of new bands. I think that this band sits pretty well next to Anthropophagus. I think if you missed their full length, that's worth checking out. And then Dipygus, their first record, which I know that's a little bit different, even for just shades of autopsy-esque death metal. But I think you get in the right mindset uh, without the samples and things in there. So the big thing about a record like this is that the production it's distinctly shit, and I don't mean that in a bad way. What I mean is that um, the uh, sort of like you would get on an old Mortician record or something like that. There's a little bit of a hollowness to some of those instruments. The bass guitar has been, uh, it's obviously tuned very low, but they have the some manner of distortion on the effect of it, which leaves you hearing just the crisping uh, sort of distortion crackling above in the mix, and then the low end is sort of flopping below. And I would associate that kind of sound with earlier Undergang, or even like a lot of bands that came out after Symphonies of Sickness really hit. Uh, without like going full Demolic or whatever. So for me, like I really love late 80s death metal. And so this is a great record to me. I think it's pretty much on par with the first one, since the production didn't really bother me on that one. It did some people, but it's kind of my shit. I really like it. So it's a pretty easy grab for me. They've got the Impetigo logo and they sound a little bit like Autopsy. I'm probably going to enjoy that record and buy the CD. So, um, yeah, pretty easy recommendation for me. Pretty obvious thing that I would like, and no major surprises here other than they just created a bit finer work. I think the focus on the riffs here and just sort of the guitar work really sells the record more than any other aspect. So I think they could mix up the drumming a little bit more, but they don't really need to change anything at this point. This is just good death metal, and if that's what they want to do, I'm going to show up for it every time. So. Uh, read more of the read more of the review to figure out what I think in more detail. But and make your own decisions from there.